Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Hello and welcome to the Skeptic Zone, episode number 380 for the 31st of January 2016. Richard Saunders here with you from Sydney, Australia. Coming up on this week's show, we're going to kick off with Jo Alabaster. Some evidence, please, with Jo. Jo's going to be talking to us about the importance of being on the bone marrow register. Now, I must admit this is something that hasn't really crossed my mind, but it is now. It's certainly crossing my mind now, and it may cross yours after listening to Evidence Please with Jo Alabaster. Following that, I catch up with a dear old friend of mine, somebody I haven't seen for a while, Professor Richard Wiseman, all the way from the UK. Now, he's the man who does the incredibly funny and interesting quirkology videos. In fact, I must say that during the Mystery Investigators live school show, which I do from time to time with Dr H and Maynard and some other people, that we use a video from Professor Wiseman to help illustrate a point. Anyway, I catch up with Richard. He's going to be talking about psychic dogs. Oh, yes. Magical videos. His books. He writes a lot of books. And the study of dreams. An interesting interview coming up a bit later on in the show. Then it's a week in science from our friends at the Royal Institution of Australia, www.riaus.org.au. And if you're going to visit Adelaide, you should visit the Royal Institution. I think you'd enjoy it. Then to round off the show, Maynard's Spooky Action. Now, we've been talking lately about discussing the Chiropractic board. Well, Maynard finally does it. He's going to be interviewing Ken Harvery. What a legend he is in Australian skeptical circles. He gets things done. He's the thorn in the side of many a quack, I can tell you. He writes to government. He prepares reports. A man who doesn't sit back in his armchair, I can promise you that. But just before we get stuck into the Skeptic Zone, some news from Victoria, from our friends in Victoria. Well, it's a reminder for an upcoming event. For the 5th year in a row, Australia's favourite low-key grassroots skeptical event will be run at Airlie's Inlet Community Hall on Saturday the 27th of February. This is the Surf Coast Skepticamp. Now, it's a one-day event, it's free, and you'll be able to hear from local and visiting skeptics, scientists, and curious onlookers alike, as they discuss topics from cults to alt-med to local mysteries and more. The Science on Top podcast will again be doing a live recording. Sounds like a lot of fun. Lunch will be provided, but they need to know numbers, so the thing to do is to visit the Eventbrite website and find the link or do a search for Surf Coast Summer Skepticamp. I'll put a link in the show notes. So if you're in Victoria, that's the place to head on Saturday the 27th of February. Now, just before I run downstairs to find myself something to eat, please stay tuned right at the end of the show for a little announcement from me about one of our Skeptic Zone family. But now it is time for me to run downstairs, and I think I will look for a bagel with some cream cheese. That sounds pretty damn good. Well, I'm doing that. I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone.
What we want is some more evidence, please. Here's Jo Alabaster.
Hello, this is Jo Alabaster. F cancer. Cancer sucks. And F quack cancer treatments too. Medical science is working hard to develop the best treatments for various cancers. It doesn't have all the answers, but it does have the best answers. And one of those answers for some people with blood cancers is to receive a bone marrow or peripheral blood stem cell transplant. The Australian Bone Marrow Donor Registry keeps a database of Australians who have registered to be donors, along with details of their tissue type, in the hope that they can find matches for people in need. Recipients include people who have lymphoma and leukemia, as well as some genetic and autoimmune conditions, such as forms of anemia and platelet disorders. If you meet the criteria, registering to become a bone marrow donor in Australia is as simple as donating blood. The Australian Red Cross Blood Donation Service are the agency who collect blood for tissue typing for the registry. When booking an appointment with the Red Cross, simply state that you'd like to join the Bone Marrow Donation Registry also, and they will arrange the paperwork and blood collection. The registry accepts people between 18 and 45 years old, and there are some exclusions as to who can donate bone marrow, which are listed on the Australian Bone Marrow Donor Registry's website. These are different to blood donation, so some people who are unable to donate blood are still able to donate bone marrow, and some exclusion criteria are temporary, so if you're excluded now, you may still be able to sign up in the future. And tissue typing is quite interesting. It's also known as HLA typing, HLA being human leukocyte antigen. HLA markers are one of the ways our immune system determines whether cells are foreign or our own, so that the closer a match a donor's HLA markers are to the recipient's, the less likely it is that the recipient's immune system will attack the donated cells and reject the transplant. 1 in 3 people needing a bone marrow transplant have a fully matched family member who's able to donate to them. For those who don't, wider family and unrelated donor searches via bone marrow registries are needed. Should you be a match for somebody, which involves further tissue typing via a blood sample to confirm the match, there are 2 ways to donate. The best method is determined by the treating doctors involved. You may be having visions of huge needles at this point. They're used for collecting bone marrow directly from a donor's hip, while the donor's under a general anaesthetic. Post-operative pain is generally managed with paracetamol, and recovery is often swift. The removed bone marrow is replenished by the body within around 4 weeks. The alternative method of donation, which I wasn't aware of until recently, is to donate peripheral blood stem cells. This is done by injecting the donor over several days with a hormone-like treatment known as GCSF, which stimulates increased production of stem cells within bone marrow. These cells are then released into the bloodstream. Donation itself involves spending 3 to 4 hours at an apheresis centre, in which blood is taken from the donor, sent through a cell separator machine which collects stem cells needed for transplant, and then returned to the donor. The donated product is then processed and transplanted to the recipient. Healthy blood stem cells are given to the patient intravenously, and they find their way into bones to become healthy marrow. Transplantation of these healthy blood stem cells means that the patient's bone marrow can produce new red and white blood cells and platelets. It also means that the patient can have ongoing chemotherapy and/or radiotherapy as directed by their clinician. Now, all of this came to my attention recently because I saw a tweet on my timeline from Lymphoma Australia, who are campaigning to find a donor for a specific person. Quote, "Despite a worldwide search, one Australian family is still looking for a bone marrow donor for their much-loved mum. You can help. If you're an Australian with UK heritage and eligible to join the Australian Bone Marrow Registry, please consider taking the time as soon as you can to donate blood and ask to join the Bone Marrow Registry. Even if you aren't the match, your blood will still be a wonderful gift to another Australian in need." End quote. The next tweet on my timeline was from a friend who tweets a lot in support of evidence-based medicine and people campaigning against dangerous quackery, stating that she was the person who needed the transplant. It was something of a shock. She'd never been public about having lymphoma, and I wanted to somehow help. She spoke with me about peripheral blood stem cells, other people she knew who were in need of transplants, and her personal situation raising children and living with lymphoma. I really wanted this week's report to not only give you some information on the Bone Marrow Registry, but to take you through my own experience of joining. But unfortunately, I'm not eligible to donate. Maybe you or someone you know can though, and the more people are on it, the greater chance the registry can find a match to save somebody's life. For more information on the Australian Bone Marrow Donor Registry, you can visit www.abmdr.org.au. And to line up an appointment to register via the Red Cross, call 131495 and ask about joining the registry. If you're one of our non-Australian listeners and you're interested in signing up, Googling bone marrow donation should give you some leads on the agencies and procedures used in your country. Several bone marrow donation registries worldwide, including the Australian Bone Marrow Donor Registry, have shared databases with de-identified donor information, so donors who sign up are able to help others in need worldwide. I hope that if you're eligible to donate bone marrow and interested in doing so, you'll consider joining a registry, and that you'll let others know that there's something they can do if they want a chance to help people with blood cancers and other conditions who would benefit from a bone marrow transplant. For more evidence, please visit evidenceplease.net, find it on Facebook, or find me on Twitter @Jo Alabaster. And if you sign up for the Bone Marrow Registry, send me a tweet or drop me a line via jo@evidenceplease.net so I can say thank you and let my friend know that the skeptic community are signing up to help her and others with blood cancers.
G'day, this is Dr. Karl Kruszelnicki, proud to be a skeptic, and you can find out more about me at drkarl.com and get lots of free stuff there as well.
And joining me now all the way from one of the cities I dream about visiting or living in or being there anytime I can get, Edinburgh. What a beautiful city it is. It's Dr. Richard Wiseman. Hello, Richard.
Hello.
Great to talk with you. We haven't caught up for a while. Just as a general background for people who aren't familiar with your work, what's the Richard Wiseman story in a nutshell?
Well, are you sitting comfortably? It's a long story. I was born.
Yes.
I was born. Yes, that's right.
Oh,
in 1992.
Oh, good. Yes.
So yes. It's. I look a lot older than that, obviously, but it's just been a very stressful life.
So you're a couple of years older than me. That's good. Keep going.
That's correct. That's correct. Yes. So I'm a psychologist. Started my working life as a magician many years ago. Still heavily involved in magic. I know lots of magicians. I was with one of them today, actually. And then I also have carried out research into the paranormal. That's why my initial work was looking at from a sort of skeptical perspective, and then looked at the psychology of illusion, and then started looking at self-help and how you make yourself happier and luckier and so on. And now I make YouTube videos, and I give talks, and I do live shows, and I do a little bit of television, and I'm just generally a very, very pleasant person.
Well, that we should end the interview right there. Richard Wiseman, thank you very much. But before we end the interview, now, folks, if you haven't subscribed to Richard's YouTube channel, it's called Quirkology. Quirkology. Yep. Quirkology. And I noticed, Richard, I was just having a quick look through today. I am a subscriber, of course, but I noticed I am one of almost 2 million subscribers, and that should tell you something, folks, about how interesting the channel is. And not too long ago, you put out a new video where you make a ball disappear. You do all sorts of very interesting tricks. And what's really great is you can watch half the video and see the ball or whatever it is disappear, and you can pause it and replay the first part over and over and over and over again until you go insane. Then, if you let the video play through, you can see the secret. And I must say that I paused this thing about 6 times, and I gave up, and I had to look at the secret, and I nearly fell off my chair. That is your latest one, where the ball disappears, is surely one of the best. That must have been many takes.
It was many, many takes. And so, yes, you're absolutely right about the two halves of the video. The first part is showing what magicians refer to as the effect, the magical bit. And normally with magicians, you don't get to go backstage and see what they refer to as the method. But with the quackology tricks, all of which I invent, the idea is that the method is particularly intriguing and rather fun. And also it's something that magicians would never use, so I don't get shouted at by my magical colleagues. And yeah, the ball video, I think it was another way. It's always the same. I get everyone together to film one of these videos, and I say to them, it'll be about an hour to do this. And then I've got this one worked. I say it'll be about an hour. Ignore what happened last time. It'll be about an hour. And then about 3 or 4 hours later, when Mr. Goodwill has not only left the building, he's got a taxi over the other side of town, and everyone is just fed up with hearing the sound of my voice as I repeat the script again and again, or go through the actions again and again. Eventually, we get one take that works, and that's the one you see. So yeah, I think that's probably about 30 takes, something like that. But it's so much fun to kind of put this stuff out there, and I love the ball one. And has a slightly weird genesis, actually, because I went on holiday to Spain, and I went to a monkey park. I wouldn't really normally go to a monkey park, but I went to a monkey park, and just as I walked through the gates of the monkey park, a friend of mine sent me an email with a link to a clip of an orangutan enjoying a magic trick.
Oh, yes. Oh, I've seen that. That's brilliant. Wonderful. Yes, yeah, wonderful.
It's wonderful. So
yeah.
I'm watching this as I walk into Monkey Park. And I said to my friend, I emailed my friend back, and I said, I'll go over to the chimps who are the other side of the park, and I'll show them a magic trick. So I go over, and boy, the chimps are not interested in my trick. I don't know if they've seen other magicians. I don't know if there's been the local magic club's been in the week before. They are not interested. There's no interest in the chimps. And then I went over to the smaller monkeys that you're allowed to play with. You're not allowed to play with the chimps for a very good reason, but the smaller monkeys you can play with. And the smaller monkeys, as soon as you held up a piece of fruit, they took it away and ran away with it. So I thought I could use this for a magic trick. So if you look on Vine, there's a tiny video of me making a grape disappear with the aid of one of these monkeys, because as soon as he sees the piece of fruit, he takes it from me and runs off. So I made that, but then that got me thinking about how you would actually make a ball disappear in the position I was holding it, which this monkey, which is the genesis of the YouTube clip. So there we go. Lots of information you didn't want to know about the genesis of the vanishing red ball.
Well, it's what's fabulous is every at regular intervals. I don't know if you have a decision that they're every month or every 6 months or every 3, or whatever the case may be. But regularly, you put up a new a video where something miraculous will happen, and it gives the people like me the chance to try and work it out to the best of our ability. That one, I thought of every possible conceivable thing you were doing. But when I did, I ruled out camera tricks, as in funny editing, shall I say.
Yeah. Like that's the one thing we never do. We would never edit. We will never use a camera trick. So what you're seeing is what you would see if you were standing exactly where the camera
was. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. And we love the fact that it drives people mad. So there's lots of magicians that will just watch it again and again, trying to work out the method, and that's the part of the fun of it. And but they are incredibly hard to come up with, because you've got to come up with these fresh ideas and then film it and so on. But they're so much fun. So yeah, I hope people enjoy the quackology videos.
Well, it began with a wonderful one you did with a card trick, sitting at a table with your friend, and we're all concentrating on the card trick, which is very interesting, but unbeknownst to us, all sorts of other things are happening in the video. I won't spoil it for people who haven't seen it, but that's a very famous video. The card trick. It's years ago now, 3 or 4 years ago since that was put online, and it's been copied, which is what do they say? It's a sincere form of flattery when you copy something.
Yeah, lots of people have done their own versions, which is fine, actually. I mean, that's part of the joy of YouTube, is to see people sort of riffing on it. And yeah, one of the nicest things that happened, that went online. Actually, the original goes back a long way. The original goes back to almost 2009. And it went online, and about 2 or 3 months later, had an email from Teller, out of Penn and Teller. And Teller said, we love this video, and we would like to use it as sort of an inspiration for a piece that we're going to perform. platform. And I said, oh, that's great. And then next time I was in Vegas, I went to their live show, and indeed, every night they do a piece which is based on the color-changing card trick. And so it's so lovely that a thought that started off in my head and then went onto YouTube then inspires sort of two of my heroes to do something amazing in Vegas every night. So that the joy of YouTube is you never know who's watching.
Yeah, absolutely. And you must get some criticism, and let me use that as a segue, because what you're also known for, although it's now retreating into the dark, dim past. Now, as a bit of a background, folks, in 1986 or the late 80s, there were reports of a so-called telepathic dog in a place called Ramsbottom, called JT. I'm not making any of this up. And JT's owner was under the impression that JT knew when she was returning home and would wait by the window, even if she was miles away in town or somewhere else or whatever the case may be. And Rupert Sheldrake, who a lot of our listeners, they'll know that name, conducted a series of experiments with JT the dog and came to the conclusion that there was a telepathic connection. And then you came along, did your own experiments, which sort of indicated that there wasn't. And it's all on YouTube. You can check this out. I was just refreshing my memory today, and wow, you look so young on some of these videos.
It was only filmed a week ago.
Oh, was it? Yeah. And just before we came on air, I was just having a quick chat to you, and I was saying that Rupert Sheldrake, I guess he's still a bit sore about the fact that you came along and had a look at this, because just in the last 6 months or so, he with Pam Smart, the dog's owner, have put up a video basically whinging, as we say, about the fact that you came along and tried to debunk it. And they say in this video that you completely failed to debunk the fact that this dog had telepathic magical powers. That must have been an interesting time.
It was. I mean, it started off, as you say, many years ago. I'm actually struggling to remember half of what happened now, but it started off on the Paul McKenna World of the Paranormal, which was a TV show over here, a big TV show, and they had footage from, I think, an Austrian television crew, which had carried out an experiment with JT, and they only had the footage where JT was going to the window as his owner, which is Pam, was returning. And then I was the sort of skeptic in the studio and said, well, the problem here is we don't know what's happening the rest of the time. Maybe he's constantly going to the window. And so Rupert, who's investigating JT at the time with Pam, said, why don't you come up and conduct your own experiments? And so Matt Smith and I, who's my research assistant at the time, we drove up, we did 2 experiments, didn't think that the dog was psychic. We then returned again, did another 2, didn't think that it was psychic, and wrote that up. And then Rupert sort of maintained that there was a statistical effect in there. It wasn't a sort of directly observable big effect. There was still something a bit odd about the dog's behavior. And so criticised our work. And then for the next sort of 5 or 6 years or something like that, the two of us have gone back and forth with increasingly complicated papers about whether or not the dog is psychic. Just to see sort of 2 grown men arguing about whether this very lovely dog, unfortunately passed away now, but was psychic, is quite a sight. And it is all on the web. If people want to get into it, all those papers are out there. I'll warn you now, it is complicated. But, weirdly, I'm kind of a fan of Rupert in many ways, because what he is fantastic at doing is doing experiments out in the real world that are relevant to people's lives. And so whether it's the remote detection of staring or the dog work, some of his other work that he's carried out, he is actually, I think, doing the right sort of thing. Often I'm very critical of his methods, but I do think he's a very creative guy and a very pleasant guy. So it sort of saddens me a bit that we've crossed swords so many sort of times, because I can imagine in a different context we'd be very close friends. But that's the way it goes in science. And if you want to read the material, it is all out there in gory detail, and you can decide for yourselves whether or not that dog's psychic.
Well, we can decide for ourselves. And what a pity JT is no longer with us. Maybe we can get a pet psychic to contact JT. That would solve the problem. That would clear it up. We could ask JT directly, are you psychic?
I don't know that psychics contact animals.
I'm sure they do.
I don't. That's a very good question. Yes, do they channel dead out? Maybe they do. There we are. There's a whole PhD thesis in there for someone, not me.
Not you.
I'll make that quite clear.
Oh, I don't know if you've caught up with the fact that there's a university here in Wollongong who just recently awarded a PhD to someone who wrote a thesis on extolling the virtue of anti-vaccination conspiracy theories. From a point of view of being an anti-vaxxer, it's mind-boggling. So maybe I can get a PhD at the University of Wollongong, I think.
On channeling animals.
On channeling animals.
I think so, yes.
No doubt. Now, let's have a quick chat about some of your books. Of course, you don't just do research papers. You don't just do marvellous online videos. You don't just talk to psychic dogs. You write books.
I do.
You do?
Yes. Far too many, some would say. Not me. You understand, or my publisher, but others would say, no, I've written, what's the last one? I've just written one that's coming out towards the end of this year, but the one before that was called Night School, and all about the science of sleep and dreaming, which I love. I've become absolutely fascinated.
Now, didn't you have
dreaming.
An app about that, I think?
Yes. Yeah, that was so there are two sort of pathways into the book. One was that I used to suffer from night terrors when I was an adult, actually. It's unusual. I didn't have them as a kid, had them as an adult. And people don't know that's where you sit up in bed. You appear to be awake because your eyes are open, but you're not. Actually, you're in one of the deepest forms of sleep. And you think there's some kind of weird entity, some normally sort of demonic entity in the room, and you scream out. And what's sort of vaguely amusing about it is if you're sleeping next to somebody else, they genuinely wake up because you've just screamed out. So they wake up and they're obviously in full waking state and adrenaline going and heart beating. And then you just fall straight back to sleep, leaving them fully awake and alert for the next kind of hour or so. So it's more terrifying for them in some ways, certainly more problematic for them than it is for the person suffering them. So I had those for a while and got fascinated by what was happening in my mind. And then part of it was I was simply sleeping in a room that was too hot. And once you bring the temperature down in the room, you don't have them quite so much. So I now sleep in essentially an ice box, which is delightful for Caroline, who has to sleep next to me. But anyway, that's what I do. So there's that. And then around the same time, I was talking to an app company. I'd read some research about what's called dream intrusion, which is that when you dream, although you're blind, you're not deaf, you can hear sounds, and often you incorporate them into your dream. So you may hear an alarm clock go off, and you hear it as church bells, for example, in your dreams, a very common one. And there was a little bit of research in the 1970s, very esoteric work, which looked at what happened when you played in sounds to people when they were dreaming, perhaps pleasant sounds or whatever it is. And they found that yes, indeed, you could influence people's dreams. So we made an app out of it. We asked people to say on the app what time they wanted to wake up. In the 45 minutes or so before you wake up, you're almost certainly dreaming. And so the app would quietly play in a soundscape of your choice. So you could decide to go for a walk in the country. You could go for a walk along the beach. You could be attacked by zombies, whatever you wanted. That we had a soundscape for it. And then in the morning, when you did wake up, the app would ask you to type in your dream. And we collected millions of dream reports and also found that the soundscapes were indeed, in terms of the nature ones at least, making people feel more relaxed. And they were having much pleasant dreams.
That's interesting because often I'll fall asleep with earbuds in and I'm listening to a podcast or some radio show or something. And if I don't set the timer and the device switches itself off, it'll often play right through the night. But during the wee hours or not long before waking, I distinctly remember the podcast or the people speaking being incorporated into the dream. It's quite weird.
It is very weird, and so if you're a particularly light sleeper, it's very likely to happen. If people are struggling to sleep, obviously I wouldn't recommend your podcast because this will keep anyone up with such stimulating conversation. But there is we created some music which is free on YouTube, which people can listen to, very relaxing music. But also there's another podcast called, I think, Sleep With Me, which is a guy just talking gibberish. So it makes no sense at all. It's a bit like having a conversation with me. It makes no sense at all. But because it's quite hard to try and make sense of it, it does put you to sleep. And it's been very effective, many, many downloads. So I always recommend that to people. And so I've become fascinated by sleep and dreaming.
Wow, I might try it myself. Although since I've started this process of listening to something as I'm falling asleep, I've got quite addicted to it, I guess. And now if I'm in a quiet place with no noise, dead quiet in a hotel room or something like that, it's too eerie. It's the old case of people can sleep better if they hear the rain on the roof or something, or the sea, the wind, or something like that. It's an interesting phenomenon.
That's right. I mean, you're saying repetitive and not too much of patterning in there, and so on. So there, we spend about a third of our lives asleep, and about a quarter of that time dreaming, and we just sort of think we turn off our minds, and it just so isn't the case. I mean, there's all this sleep science showing that you're in a different stage of consciousness, and that is absolutely vital for psychological and physical well-being. And yet, because of what's happening with 24-hour media and the web and so on, we're squeezing sleep time and trying to spend as little time as possible in bed asleep, particularly teenagers and kids. And we really need to be doing the opposite. We need to recognize that sleep is in pretty much every animal in the world for a reason. It plays a vital role in our lives.
Absolutely. Now, Richard, I understand that you're also, at least on the fringes somewhat, involved with the Good Thinking Society and our good friends at the Good Thinking Society, Michael Marshall and Simon Singh. That must be interesting.
It is interesting. In fact, the name, the Good Thinking Society, is my idea.
Hey.
So Simon came to me a few years ago, and he said he was thinking of setting up a charity, and he had various ideas, and we kicked them around. I said, "What about Good Thinking Society?" And that's what stuck. And they're doing great work. So Marshu works with him. They've done some sort of lovely work on sort of homeopathy in the NHS, and it's sort of great to see. It sort of speaks, and I'm seeing this more and more actually across the world. It speaks to the power of one or two people. Often the two of them are accomplishing more than 20 or 30 people in a bigger organization just across the other side of town.
Yeah.
And it always reminds me of, someone like Randy, where you kind of think it's just one guy, and he's not even especially tall. It's one short guy, but my goodness, look at what he accomplished.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen the Honest Liar documentary.
Oh, yes. I'm almost in it.
You're almost in it. Right?
Well, they were filming a big section of that 1 year during the Amazing Meeting, and I was in a big conference with Randy and Banachek and some other people in my role as being on the $1 Million Committee. And out of the corner of my eye, there's this camera crew circling us like vultures. And that was the camera crew for An Honest Liar. And when I went to see the movie, I thought, I might see myself, but I just ended up on the cutting room floor. But that's normal.
That happens to the best of us. But it's great. I mean, wonderful movie, and it just sort of shows you, what one person has accomplished. And so sometimes, I think we get some people get a bit down and go, there's just this lone voice of skepticism and what different. Well, look at Simon, look at Randy. These are individuals, very talented individuals, nevertheless, but just one person making a huge difference. So, I'm impressed by the Good Thinking Society.
It is good, and we certainly are good friends with the Good Thinking Society here at the Skeptic Zone, and we promote them whenever we can. In fact, Michael Marshall is a regular guest on the show, and I'm always delighted to have him. Before we wrap up, Richard, and I'll add this link to the show notes, although it's easy to find, folks, if you want to hear a very pleasant chat with Richard Wiseman. In 2012, I visited Edinburgh, and Richard and I had a stroll along the streets and down by the river, and we just had a chat about skepticism in general and all sorts of things. Now, that's on the Skeptic Zone episode number 176, and that's from March 2012. And that was a very pleasant afternoon I spent with you wandering around Edinburgh.
It was very nice. I remember that. Was that almost 3-4 years ago? My goodness.
Yeah. I know. I had to remind myself. I had to look it up and see exactly when that was. It doesn't seem like that long ago, but that was a very.
It doesn't.
Yeah, and I was very pleased at that visit too. I also spoke at Skeptics in the Pub, I think, in Edinburgh, which was
very good.
Which was a big thrill. And then you and I think, subsequently went down to Manchester for QED.
Yes, QED is great, which of course, Marsh, who we spoke about earlier on, the Good Thinking Society, helps run QED. So, and again, another example of a fairly small group of people, I think about 6 of them, running this huge skeptics convention, which is probably certainly the best skeptical event in the UK. And just amazing what people can do when they put their minds to it.
Yes, and if there's any airline out there which I can suck up to, Qantas, hello, British Airways, Lufthansa, I don't care. Bulgarian Air, if you want to get me tickets to go to QED, I will certainly speak highly of your airline.
Couldn't you boat it? You just a couple of, I've seen those sort of rowing boats, and those people, well, it can't be that far. You could just come around somewhere and just boat the whole thing.
I could, and the exercise I could gain doing that would let me feast out at QED. I think that's a very good idea.
I think so. If you set up a Kickstarter for that, I think there's going to be a lot of support. That's all I'm saying.
I think... No doubt. Richard, how can people catch up with your work? Where can they go? Where can they visit?
They can, I guess, come on Twitter, at Richard Wiseman on Twitter. I post lots of things there. They can look at my website, richardwiseman.com. They can look at my videos on YouTube with the Quackery channel, or they can come along and see me live, which is my favourite thing for them to do, and come and say hello afterwards. So I give talks all over the place, and I always post them on Twitter. So, come along.
That's the ticket, folks. Especially follow Richard on Twitter. Please subscribe to Quirkology on YouTube, because you will be delighted, absolutely delighted, and quite mystified by the videos he puts up. And when you see the solution to the problems, you'll go, oh. Yeah. Which is my reaction. Richard,
I hope it'll be slightly more than I hope it'll be a sense of delight, wonder, and awe.
That's what I meant. I'm sorry.
I see. That's
the Australian way of expressing delight and awe and wonder.
I see. It's had that profound disappointment to me. He's done that again with a thread.
He's done that again. Yeah. Oh, is that all there is to it? Richard Wiseman, all the way from beautiful Edinburgh. Thank you very much.
A pleasure. Thank you very much for inviting me on.
Dr. Harriet Hall, MD, known to thousands as the Skepdoc, a retired family physician and former Air Force flight surgeon. She writes about medicine, so-called complementary and alternative medicine, science, quackery, and critical thinking. Harriet now has a free course, a series of 10 video lectures on science-based medicine and alternative medicine. The videos and an accompanying course guide can be found by following the link at skepdoc.info or by visiting web.randy.org/educational-modules.html. Topics covered in the series are science-based medicine versus evidence-based medicine, what is CAM, chiropractic, acupuncture, homeopathy, naturopathy and herbal medicine, energy medicine, miscellaneous alternatives, pitfalls in research, and science-based medicine in the media and politics. Harriet covers each topic in a matter-of-fact, no-nonsense way that's sure to educate and entertain. Skepdoc.info.
Welcome to A Week in Science from RiAus, bringing you the science you need to know. Ever wanted to take a stroll on the surface of Mars, maybe analyse some rock formations? Well, thanks to a collaboration between NASA and Microsoft, scientists are getting the chance to do just that. Although it's about 55 million kilometres away at best, and at times as far as 400 million kilometres away, thanks to virtual reality, the surface of Mars has never been closer, as long as you've got the right accessories. Strap on a Microsoft HoloLens headset and fire up their on-site software, and you'll be transported to another world. Using data from the Curiosity rover, the virtual reality system creates a three-dimensional, explorable planetary surface. Scientists can behave just like geologists do here on Earth, walking around an object to get a better view, crouching down to inspect it from a new angle, and understanding the spatial relationships between objects in a more natural, human way. Researchers can also do things like target an object by looking at it and use gesture-based menus to program the rover. The technology can bring together scientists from all over the world. Researchers from different countries can both wear headsets and access the same Mars surface program, communicating directly through the system. NASA's next steps for exploring Mars are to send an orbiter in 2016, participate in the European Space Agency's rover mission in 2018, and send their own rover in 2020. And now, 4 fast facts about the red planet. Mars is about half the size of Earth, but the land area of both planets is about the same. Depending on planetary positions, launch speed, and fuel load, it takes between 150 and 300 days for spacecraft to travel from Earth to Mars. The first Mars rover, the Pathfinder Sojourner, landed in 1997. The Spirit and the Opportunity arrived in 2004, and Curiosity has been patrolling the surface since 2012. Curiosity has a tendency to take selfies, but relies on its friends back on Earth to digitally remove the extendable arm that takes the snap. That's it for this Week in Science. For more information on exploring Mars, go to the RiAus website, riaus.org.au. Follow us on Twitter at RiAus and like us on Facebook. I'm Casey Harrigan and we'll catch you next week.
Be Reasonable is a podcast from the Merseyside Skeptic Society, hosted by Michael Marshall. In each monthly interview, we'll examine beliefs from outside of the mainstream, exploring how those views are constructed and what evidence people feel supports their case. On the latest episode, I speak with Dr. Paul Byrne, a paediatrician and prominent campaigner against organ donation.
You use the word market, and yes, it is market because the organ transplant industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and it all depends on getting healthy organs. And the only place you get healthy organs from living persons.
Hear what Paul has to say, as well as downloading back issues of the show by going to merseysideskeptics.org.uk/podcasts or by searching for Be Reasonable on iTunes.
Here's Maynard's spooky action at a distance.
Well, a cub reporter Maynard here on the scene now with the man who has been a stick in the craw of a crotch of something of the authorities over the years. It's Ken Harvery. He's down on everything, really. He's best known for his anti-quackery work around Australia, a bit of an activist. And you've been out there on behalf of the Friends of Science in Medicine doing a few things over the last, couple of months. You want to fill us in on what you've been up to, Ken?
Yeah, basically we've been having a go at chiropractors, certainly the crazy proportion of chiropractors that believe that all complaints in mankind are related to vertebral subluxations. That's the original doctrine of Palmer. And therefore they believe that cracking the spine can cure anything.
Now, just before you go any further, Ken, I've been confused over the years between homeopathy and naturopathy and all those sort of things. Are there some chiropractors that are on the level and do regular, what you would call science-based medicine?
Oh, yes, indeed. And there's a split, quite a distinct split in the Australian profession at least, where there's two new organisations split off from the original one. The two new organisations basically support musculoskeletal treatments only for chiropractors. They've come out supporting the British Chiropractic Association statement that says subluxation is a historical myth and has got no place in terms of treating diseases today. So it's good. And in terms of the universities, Murdoch University in Western Australia, their School of Chiropractic, again, is very science-based, evidence-based, musculoskeletal treatment only. And on their website, they're very clear. We do not treat middle ear infections and other things that some of our colleagues do.
And where does it sit statistically? If you go to any chiropractor, what is the chances? Is it like 50-50? How are they split over this issue with the spine?
Well, I don't know the numbers, but I regrettably, from looking at websites and putting in complaints, I still suspect that probably the majority, well, certainly at least 50-50 of chiropractors are the crazy variety, because there's hundreds of websites out there promoting chiropractic for everything from curing childhood diseases to preventing caesarean sections in pregnant women, as long as you have regular chiropractic adjustments all through your pregnancy. There'll be less caesarean sections and more rapid labour, etc. So there's a lot of crazies out there.
They aren't the same people who do the balloon up the nose trick, are they?
I haven't heard of balloons up the nose. I think, chiropractors, they like manipulating backs and necks, although certainly manipulating necks is not without hazards of causing strokes from vertebral artery dissections. So I certainly would never let one near my neck. I think the evidence is that in terms of sore backs, chiropractors can be as good as physios or anyone else, probably not better. And I've got no problem with them treating sore backs.
Oh, look, Ken, just on an awareness or is there actually a sort of a clear and present danger from them? I guess it's the old question: what harm are they doing in the community by misrepresenting, the way you should cure people?
Yeah, I think there's two problems. I mean, there's misrepresentation of their ability to diagnose and cure, which can lead people into a series of treatments which are not going to do the underlying illness any good at all, which means that it can progress, and so patients can delay getting more evidence-based treatment. And of course, sometimes with serious diseases, that can be quite a concern. So one of the problems is just delayed proper diagnosis and treatment. The other concern, of course, is that they rip people off. That, I mean, if they're signing you up for regular chiropractic manipulation in pregnancy, or again, many of them come up with the fact that, birth's terribly traumatic for the spine of a baby, and therefore all babies need regular chiropractic manipulation to stop these terrible subluxations in the first 12, 18 months of life. That just is ripping off patients' money unnecessarily. And occasionally, and I think to be fair, it's rare, chiropractic can cause real problems. I've mentioned strokes from vertebral artery dissection where necks are manipulated and the arteries can be interfered with. Now, there's dispute over how common that is. It is probably fairly rare, but it certainly does happen.
Okay. And what can you do about this? I mean, you know the people to ring, you know who to get onto about this.
Well, for many years, my colleagues and I have been putting in complaints about these things. 5 years ago, chiropractors came under the national regulatory system, and there is for registered health practitioners, and that includes doctors, nurses, pharmacists, etc., and chiropractors got into that system. So they come under the national law that governs registered practitioners, which has got very clear advertising provisions. Thou shalt not advertise in a misleading or deceptive manner. Thou shalt not use testimonials. Thou shalt not encourage unnecessary use of health services. And you can hear from what I've said that we believe there's breaches of all of those consistently. And for the first 2 or 3 years that the national scheme was set up, the Chiropractic Board said they wanted to educate people about their responsibilities, and that was their approach. So you'd send in a complaint and you'd hear nothing more, but if you queried them, they were educating people. 5 years has now gone on, and certainly over the last few years, we've put in a lot more complaints. Again, the approach has just been educative. In more and more newsletters have come out from the Chiropractic Board, guys, you should be evidence-based, but they've been very non-specific. They have not said, thou shalt not do, thou shalt not manipulate children for childhood illnesses. They have not said you should not manipulate pregnant women to shorten labour or prevent caesarean sections, because there's no evidence for it. They haven't actually produced any public determinations on the complaints put in, and there's been hundreds of complaints put in. They haven't actually analysed them to say, OK, there are consistently certain practices going on that are not evidence-based, and we should tell people don't do it. They've never told people don't do it. And so, again, it's this year, or middle of last year, my colleagues and I started talking to the ACCC, the Australian Competition and Consumer Authority, agency, because they have got also powers under national consumer law to prosecute for misleading and deceptive and unconscionable conduct. And certainly my argument is that many chiropractors have got unconscionable conduct. And again, talking to the ACCC, first of all, they wanted to talk to the board. Another 12 months went by. Then we thought out about 200 or more possible complaints. We would put in 10 good representative ones, which we did last August. They were acknowledged, but heard nothing more. And so earlier this year, we looked at what had happened to those 10 representative complaints, which involved a large number of chiropractors, because it was 10 clinics, a large number of chiropractors, more than 60 sort of claims made that we felt breached the law. And what we found of the 10 clinics, only one had taken off all the claims that we felt were inappropriate. Another one seemed to have disappeared, but in fact, they'd set up a new website making the same claims. It's not an uncommon trick. And of all the other claims, we judged that something like 62% was still non-compliant. So, yes, the Chiropractic Board, we believe, had written to, or at least APRA, the Australian Practitioners Health Authority, had written to these guys saying, hey, here's a complaint. But nothing had happened, or not much had happened. Earlier this year, we went public and hit the press, Medical Journal of Australia, Insight, did an opinion editorial in the Fairfax Press, The Age and the Sydney Morning Herald, and got a large amount of media attention, which all of a sudden has stimulated the Chiropractic Board and the Australian Health Practitioners Regulatory Authority to suddenly start wanting teleconferences and meetings to see what the problem is. So,
where did the politicians sit with this? Is this the kind of thing where you want to get politicians involved, or is this a touchy one where they feel, we better not get involved in case this makes people who are in favour of it not like us?
Well, indeed, the national registration system was set up by the Council of Australian Government's Health Council, which is all state and federal territory ministers, which obviously is a bit of a sort of dog's breakfast. But the system, the registration system and the complaint system is responsible to the Australian health and territory ministers. And so, yes, we have written, and many civil society organisations such as Consumers Health Forum, Choice, the Australian Consumers Association, Friends of Science and Medicine, have written to the COAG Health Council demanding that something be done. Now, again, that's within the last week or two, but yes, we have taken it into the political arena, and it'll be interesting to see what response we get.
Yes. Do you think there's votes in the medical reform of alternative and complementary medicine?
Look, it was interesting. I was just watching last night. There was a program from PBS, from the public broadcasting system in America, on their crazy system of supplements and the dangers that lack of regulation causes. I think patients, when they know that there is both medicines and like complementary medicines that have never been evaluated to see if they work and which claims are being made which lack evidence, and when they find that there are practitioners such as chiropractors, naturopaths, homeopaths, doing the same, making claims that can't be validated, people get pissed off. I mean, as they should. The problem is getting it out there, because most people don't go for evidence-based assessment of their health practitioners. It's who they hear over the back fence, you know.
Look, I've got to say, Ken, I'm actually completely wacky on the ephedra right now.
Well, ephedra has finally been taken off the market. But,
right, that's it. I'm going to charge more for it.
But the problem, again, that is the need for consumer education, which again is the role of consumer organisations, Choice, Consumers Health Forum, etc. I mean, we've got to let people know, and again, the national press and the media has got an important role here. We've got to let them know that there's craziness out there. And again, the press and the media's have been pretty good on this. Recently, the ABC TV's taken up, some of even Channel 10 projects taken this up. There's been, I think, good media attention, all of which helps concentrate the mind of politicians. I mean, my experience is politicians don't give a bugger about an erudite paper in a medical journal of Australia. But if consumer organisations and national media starts pressuring them, that's voters, and they'll do something about it. So I'm fairly confident something might happen this time around.
Ken, what I find this normally is, and it's certainly the case, I think, with the anti-vaccination people, is it isn't so much that they're suspicious of the science, they're suspicious of the big business and the authority figures. Do you think that's true?
Well, of course, that's terribly ironic because, yes, I mean, clearly there is suspicion of big pharma, big business, and there is the hope that small business and little pharma is fine and green and ethical. There is no difference in my experience. There are charlatans and rip-off merchants in both areas. And yes, you know, there have been and continue to be big problems with big pharma in terms of, censoring negative results, misleading trials, etc., etc. But equally well, in the so-called complementary medicine space, there's the same thing. And with practitioners, I mean, well, certainly the facts are, chiropractors, for example, are running at 3 times the number of complaints per 1,000 chiropractors for advertising violations as the next commonest, which is dentists. And medicos and pharmacists are way behind in terms of, complaints per 1,000. Those chiropractors are right up there, right leading the pack, way out in front with advertising complaints. But people don't know about it.
What about the Reiki touch healers? How are they going?
Oh, well, that's the other area, of course, which fortunately, there was a review by the National Health and Medical Research Council into looking at the evidence base of a number of alternative and natural therapies, homeopathy, naturopathy, etc. And that was stimulated by the past Labor government, who sort of were a bit concerned about the escalating private health insurance rebate costs because complementary therapies are covered by a number of private health insurance funds, and the government, wrongly in my belief, provides some rebates and encourages people. There was a look at the evidence base, and homeopathy, of course, was the first cab off the rank. No evidence clearly for homeopathy, and indeed it turned out there was no evidence for any of the others either, at least on the reviews done by the National Health and Medical Research Council. That should have led immediately to a decision to put the kibosh on the rebate for non-evidence-based therapies. But this is where, again, politics comes in. That was set up by the previous Labor government. The current Liberal government, the minister wasn't too sure about this inquiry set up by a Labor health minister. By definition, don't want anything to do with that, and hasn't actually followed through. It's all too difficult to actually stop rebates for private health insurance for non-evidence-based therapies, according to the Minister, Susan Ley. Now, again, my own belief is that's because the industry pressures are severe on her to sort of say, let's keep this going, let's keep us in the manner in which we're accustomed. So, evidence is one thing, regrettably action is another.
So what can we all do about it? How can we help out with this? If the skeptic out there is listening, they've got their blood boiling and they want to do something, what should they do? Ken, you're the expert on doing something.
Well, I think what we've learnt is that it is worthwhile putting in complaints. It can be an unrewarding experience. You may never hear what happens, but they do get logged and people do use them to bring pressure to bear. And so, yes, my advice is if you see something fishy or it's too good to be true, then put in a complaint. If you don't know how to put in a complaint, then get in touch with, Skeptics Australia, Friends of Science and Medicine, email it your concerns, and we will put in a complaint, or we'll help you to put in one. We've got to get people to actually be aware of their rights, to question and be sceptical and be cynical, and pass that on to the regulatory authorities, because if people just don't do anything, then the regulatory authorities say, oh, well, no complaints, everything's fine. They certainly don't do any monitoring themselves, although it would be very easy for them to do so. So, be an activist, put in complaints, get in touch with Friends of Science and Medicine, Australian Skeptics, etc., and we can help.
Great, Ken. And what is the best website to find out more about the Friends of Science and Medicine?
Well, again, if you Google Friends of Science and Medicine, you will get there. If you Google Australian Skeptics, you'll get some good contact details.
Great. Thank you, Dr Ken Harvery. And rock on. Get out there and complain about something today, people.
Good on you. Okay, bye.
AstronomyCast takes a facts-based journey through the cosmos as it offers listeners weekly discussions on astronomical topics ranging from planets to cosmology. Hosted by Fraser Kane of Universe Today and myself, Dr. Pamela Gay of Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville, this show brings the questions of an avid astronomy lover directly to an astronomer. Together, Fraser and I explore what is known and being discovered about the universe around us. Join us each week as we take a facts-based journey through the cosmos at astronomycast.com.
Thank you for listening to The Skeptic Zone, and for people who have been listening to The Skeptic Zone for many years now, you'll of course be well aware of Fred the cat. Well, I am very sorry to say that Fred died just after the last episode of The Skeptic Zone went out to air. He died in his sleep. Here at home, he was perfectly happy the day before, doing his normal things, sleeping a lot, looking for water, food, generally being a good cat. Fred was a found kitten. My sister found Fred on a fence post in the year 2000. Poor little lost, half-starved kitten. Well, that's how he ended up here. He was good company. He had two pretty major events happen in his life. The first one was that about 6 years ago he was attacked by a Rottweiler. And poor old Fred had big puncture wounds in him. Horrible experience for everybody. He'd recovered. Good old Fred, he did recover. No broken bones, luckily. The other one was that about 3 years ago, he developed a giant tumour in his back. It was massive. The vet was quite surprised. And Fred had to undergo 2 operations to fix all that up. But survive it he did. Very sorry to not have Fred here at my feet as I record this. Very sorry not to have Adele, and some of you may remember Adele, who was the other cat. She died about 3 years ago. Rest assured, for the most part, Fred had a pretty damn good life, and a long life too. So Fred, thanks for all the company, and thanks for always being there, and we will miss you. Dearie me. Anyway, for this week, this is Richard Saunders signing off from Sydney, Australia. You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for contacts, an archive of all episodes since 2008, and our online store. Please support the Skeptic Zone by following us on Twitter @Skeptic Zone, liking us on Facebook, and leaving a review on iTunes. You can also show your support by subscribing via PayPal for as little as 99 cents a week. The Skeptic Zone is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed on the Skeptic Zone are not necessarily those of Australian Skeptics Inc. or any other skeptical organisation.